Good evening, and welcome to the 2024 CU Boulder Disability Symposium Keynote Address featuring Dr. Tumble Graham. My name is David Braggs, and I'm the chair of the Disability Symposium Planning Committee. And I have the pleasure today of introducing Dr. Graham for the keynote address. I'm a white male. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall. I have green eyes with black hair and a black beard, though it has begun to gray. I'm wearing a suit with khaki pants and a tie. I want to thank the College of Arts and Sciences Dean's Office, the Office of Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the College of Arts and Sciences, Be Well, the Office of the Senior Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Disability Services, Recreation Services, University Libraries, and the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance for their support in bringing the symposium back to Boulder for a second consecutive year. The University of Boulder is hosting a disability symposium to acknowledge that more work must be done to improve the inclusion of persons with disabilities on the CU Boulder campus. Efforts to improve inclusion must focus on students, staff, and faculty. The 2021 CU Boulder's Climate Campus Survey Report, which was released in April of 2022, found that 44% of undergraduate students and 47% of graduate students experienced incivility in the prior 12 months. For students with disabilities, these numbers climbed to 54% and 62% respectively. This symposium is a springboard to continue campus-wide conversations on how each of us can improve inclusion on campus and improve support for all persons with disabilities. The symposium organizers would also like to take a moment to issue a land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Dr. Grandin is a groundbreaking professor of animal science at Colorado State University, whose work has led to more humane treatment of livestock around the world. She has written several books about autism and her experiences living with it, including Thinking in Pictures, The Autistic Brain, and Emergence, Labeled Autistic, which Oliver Sacks said was unprecedented because there had never been before an inside narrative of autism. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tumble Graham.
It's great to be here today. We have quite a lot of things to talk about today. I was a severely autistic child when I was a little kid. I was very lucky to get really good educational intervention. I want to thank the teachers that worked with me, starting out with my speech teacher, my mother teaching me to read when I was 8, a very good science teacher got me motivated to study, and also people out in the industry that helped me. And I do a lot of talks to business people. And one of the things I tell them is you need the skills of the people who think differently. It's just that simple. So I'm going to be bringing a little different perspective. This is my book, Visual Thinking, Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. The neurodiverse minds, we need them. We need their skills. We'll be talking a little more about that. Oh, wait a minute, what happened here? This isn't working. The slides aren't changing. It's working before. Okay, we'll work with the arrow keys. Okay. The first step is they have to realize that different thinking exists. I'm an extreme visual thinker. You see, when you have people with autism, you often can get really extreme kinds of thinking. And I know a lot of physicists here. And that's going to be extreme math thinking. Probably about half of them have got some degree of autism. Well, they wouldn't be able to do that kind of math. Autism is a continuum. It goes all the way from Einstein to somebody who can't dress themselves. The same name gets put on it, and we get too locked into the name. But we need these different kinds of thinking. I think totally in pictures, so I don't think abstractly. Understand you have a great philosophy department here, some of that stuff's over my head, it's just too abstract. Because if I can't make a picture, I cannot think about it. Now, I thought everybody thought in pictures until I was in my 30s, and I asked a speech therapist to think about a church steeple, and all she saw was this, 2 lines. Now, the reason I don't ask you to think about your own house, because most people can see that. Now, being an animal behavior specialist, it was obvious to me to look at what cattle were thinking about. Now, here's an example of my own shadow scaring the cat. See, a lot of people wouldn't notice that. But cattle are sensory beings. They're very sensitive to what they see. And when I first started doing this in the 70s, people thought it was crazy to look at what cattle were seeing. Now the thing is, a visual thinker can see something that might be at risk. I went and visited this launch pad, and I saw a raccoon come out of it. And they were using the inside of the launch pad as a workshop for building fueling equipment. And I saw stuff there that I wouldn't want a raccoon chewing. And by the way, the soy-based wiring, the animals love to chew that. There's been a lot of cars that have been wrecked by that, but I see a risk. I can also see a solution to a problem. Here's a real simple example. A lady got upset that the airport airlines lost her child's stroller. She had 2 little kids. So I just see a blue Southwest Airlines wheelchair with her kids in it. That's seeing a solution to a problem. Now the other wheelchairs they have, no, they fall out of them. Has to be a blue Southwest Airlines wheelchair. You see, that's something specific, because that one would work, and the other ones would not. Yeah, that's just seeing a solution to a problem. It's a different kind of problem solving than verbally saying, yeah, airlines shouldn't lose strollers. Yeah, maybe they shouldn't. Well, there's the raccoon right there. Now let's look at how we need visual thinking and mathematical thinkers in science. What I'm seeing in science right now, and I don't like it very much, is everything's going towards mathematics. We're going to review the literature with mathematics. We're going to do all these mathematical ways of doing lit reviews and things like that. Now when I review journal articles, I look at the method section. Millions of dollars of NIH research was ruined because 2 different labs use these different mixing devices to mix up their cancer cells. And I think one of them breaks the cell walls and the other one doesn't. Everything was the same except for these 2 little mixing devices. The magnetic stirrer, which is more rough on the cells than the other little contraption, little Ferris wheel thing. Methods matter. This ruined millions of dollars worth of research. Little mixing devices. That's why you need visual thinkers going over these sort of things. Now there's 3 different kinds of thinking, and there's science that shows that there's different kinds of thinking. I'm an object visualizer, so I'm absolutely horrible at algebra. And I'm very concerned that my kind of mind is getting screened out. But you need us. Let's look at the Starliners that got stuck up there on the space station. And the thrusters weren't working. I don't think they assembled them right. I looked up some of the valves that were used in those thrusters. I put stuff like that together in a meat plant. They probably got the sealant gunk inside the thruster, and that's going to clog it up. That's why you need people like me. The mathematician calculates the re-entry angle. That's wrong, you die. But the thrusters have to thrust when the computer tells them to thrust. So you need to have both kinds of minds in engineering. What I call the clever engineers, oftentimes don't have high school degrees, but many, many mechanical patents. And the sharp people are often underestimated. Let's look at the Boeing black hole. That's my book, Visual Thinking. Talk about Fukushima and Boeing. And Fukushima forgot to put watertight doors on it. The engineers did a perfect job of making it earthquake-proof, but they didn't see they had to make it waterproof to protect the emergency pump that has an electric motor. That's not going to run in a flooded basement. You see how basic that is? Yeah, even for nuclear power, you need both kinds of thinkers. And sharp people often don't get enough credit. They don't just build things. They also invent stuff. And here is your classic STEM student, the spatial visualizer. Patterns, physics, chemistry, math, they think in patterns. Music and math, they tend to go together. And they're actually opposite different kinds of thinking, but they can work together in really complementary ways. Then of course you have the verbal thinkers. And verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize. Okay, we have to have an inclusive classroom. Well, how do we do that? I need to tell you 3 specific things that you can do. Take this thing out here, photograph the room in slow motion video. And if you've got LED lights that flicker, they'll show up on that phone. That's going to be a problem maybe for 10 to 20% of dyslexics, ADHD, autistics, and veterans with head injuries. That's going to be a problem. So what do you do if you're stuck in a room with no windows? Well, then you buy an LED light that doesn't flicker and you put it on the person's desk. The other thing is, I have a very poor working memory. So another simple accommodation, very, very simple, is information in pilot's checklist format. Okay, the steps in the chemistry experiment, put it in bullet point format. Because I cannot remember long strings of yakety yak, 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 yak. I simply cannot remember it. That's another very, very simple thing. And if a student doesn't like the noisy equipment, let them turn it on and off, because when they turn it on and off, they control it. They often can much better tolerate it. Now that's 3 specific things I've told you that you can do. 3 simple, very specific things. It's not abstract. Now here's research that shows that the different kinds of thinking really do exist. The object visualizer and the more mathematical pattern thinker. And we definitely need both kinds of thinkers. And some brand new research showed that you don't need to have language for thinking. That mathematical thinking and picture thinking isn't in the language parts of the brain. And a lot of people can be mixtures of the different kinds of minds. They can be mixtures. But you get an autistic person, you're more likely to have an extreme mathematician or an extreme visual thinker. You're going to get real extremes in the thinking, where the more regular people are mixtures. And somebody on Zoom is complaining that it's hard to hear. That's coming up in the chat. I'm using the microphone. Turns out that I have a very big visual thinking circuit in my brain. And there's another picture of my visual thinking circuit. Now, different kinds of thinkers look at things. I'm going to look at pictures of things. I want to see pictures. The verbal thinker wants to read about it. The visual spatial tends to do both. And let's look at how different kinds of thinkers go about doing a project. Let's say inventing a planet. How do art students do it? Science students, your physics people do it. And how do literature students do it? Oh, the art people come up with crystal planets, all kinds of fantastic polar bears and everything else. Science students just draw a boring circle, tell you what the gravity in the atmosphere is. The literature students make splashes of color, but you know what the literature students did? No planning. Big concepts with no planning. Big abstract concepts. Verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize. Big concepts. But how do we actually do something? I gave you some very, very specific things you could do for the inclusive classroom. Now, the first inventors were all visual thinkers, because all the first inventions were physical, mechanical devices. They were mechanical devices. A blacksmith making grain harvesting equipment. A bicycle mechanics making an airplane. The Wright brothers, they seemed pretty autistic. And here's the guy who invented the 3D printer. He was a visual thinker. Now, we've got a problem. There's a lot of stuff we're not making anymore. I went to the National Hay Association conference, and big, mechanically complicated hay baling equipment is coming from Germany. A high-wage country. Hay equipment so big they can't even use it in Germany. I was just at that meeting. There's stuff that we are not making. Half of all big 3D printers are from Europe. This is the inside of a state-of-the-art electronic chip-making machine. It's from Holland. Even though it's based on mathematical research that maybe physics people in this country have done, the machine's coming out of Holland. Yes, and it's export controlled, and it will be obsolete in 2 years. Because I originally got these pictures right before COVID. Now, we're not doing right by our little math kids either. I'm hearing too many stories in elementary school where the skills of math kids are not being developed. They just make them do the same baby math. They think everybody's the same. No, you might have a third grader in math. That third grader needs to be moved ahead in math. It's just that simple. And the mirrors in the machine are from Zeiss in Germany. And we're not making food processing equipment. You want to do chicken plant now, poultry plant now, you want to get equipment from Holland. Haying equipment, that's coming from Germany. What's going on here? We used to make all this stuff. We actually still know how to make beef. There's one guy who can't do algebra. I don't know, the algebra math things, people think you need algebra for thinking. You don't. You see, I just see it. Now, in order for me to see it, I had to know what a southwest improved wheelchair looked like. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to see that solution. So the visual thinker gets better and better at making stuff if they just go out and see a whole lot of stuff. The Mars rover fabric came from the UK, woven on high-tech European looms. There was a tour of the factory. I was reading nameplates off the machines and then looking them up. And this is the Steve Jobs theater with me screaming at it, we don't make it anymore. Structural glass walls from Germany and Italy. These are high-wage countries making this stuff. This isn't just importing cheap shoes or something like that. We pay the price for taking hands-on classes out of the schools. I love art, woodworking, sewing. If I hadn't had hands-on classes, I would have hated school. But right now, we're going all the math route, and we're forgetting about what I call the clever engineers. Let's take something like biofuels. I'm amazed at the things that chemists can make airplane fuel out of, Jet A airplane fuel. It's just amazing. You can make pigs fly. You can make it out of corn. You can make it out of palm oil. That'd be horrible from an environmental standpoint. The problem with biofuels, you can't grow enough of the feedstock. It's impossible. Maybe the hydrogen and carbon dioxide way to make fuel makes a lot more sense. Only problem is you get carbon monoxide in the process. It's a real dangerous process. But the problem we have with the biofuels is they're only sustainable up to a point. We can make skis and snowboards out of algae. Genetically modified algae can make plastic, but we have to feed it sugar. So your skis can either be made out of sugar or they can be made out of oil. That's what's called the feedstock. Base material you feed into it. But there's a lot of stuff that got done under sustainability. It wasn't sustainable at all. Like cutting down trees in the southeastern United States, pelletize the trees, put them on a diesel-powered boat to ship over to the UK to burn the power plant. Really? This is where you need the visual thinker to say, hey, that's ridiculous. Well, I see it. And I'm worried that the visual thinkers are getting screamed out, and we need them. No, I've never passed an algebra test. I majored in psychology. I had to dodge the math classes everywhere I went. I had to drop physics. But biomedical needs me, because I read about the artificial hip that had to gunk the metal-on-metal hip. I wouldn't have made that mistake. I would have seen that gunk and I would have gone, no, this is not going to work. So you're going to need people that need to do the math, but they also need the visual thinker to make sure maybe the airplanes are put together correctly. I don't like the fact that private equity bought a Boeing factory 20 years ago, and everything got rush, loose rudder bolts. I don't like that at all. My grandfather was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes. MIT trained engineer, working with an autistic guy, undiagnosed at class. They came up with this crazy idea for an autopilot. Everybody thought it was crazy. They were a garage startup. They rented a loft, and they tinkered and they tinkered and they tinkered and they got it to work. But the stolen version was in every plane in World War II. They needed a lawyer. You see, you really do need the different kinds of minds. Let's look at the food processing plant. The object visualizers lay out the whole entire factory. I worked with them back when Montfort's was Montfort's. And one of the big mistakes that was made was the shutting down of the Montfort fab shop. We don't have anybody to fix stuff anymore. I went on the coolest trip just a few months ago to the Johnson Space Center and saw the 1960s control room. It was so cool. But we had to hoof up 5 flights of stairs because the elevators were broken at the Johnson Space Center. Yeah, I'm seeing more and more of that kind of stuff. Now, on the food processing plant, all mechanical things are made by the shop people. But with the degreed engineer with the degree in the mathematics, boilers and refrigeration. We don't do that, we don't understand it. But in order to have a food processing plant, you've got to have both. You've got to have refrigeration in a food processing plant. You have to have both kinds of minds. But right now, the mechanical stuff, we're importing it right now from high-wage countries. Let's look at collaboration on my book, Visual Thinking. I wrote the first draft. Visual thinkers are kind of disorganized. Associative thinkers. Betsy Lerner, my verbal co-author, she made everything just wonderful and straightened it all out. Architects make a building look pretty. The engineers make it safe. You need to have both. 20% of the people I work with, and I spent 20 years working in heavy construction, supervising the installation of facilities that I designed. The JBS plant's got a ramp system and a restrainer I designed. You can see the ramp on Google Earth. The Fort Morgan plant's got corrals I designed, steel and concrete work I designed. But people I've worked with building this stuff, 20% of them are either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD, all undiagnosed. And they got 20 patents each. This is what's making me crazy. Right now, they won't let special ed kids take shots because of liability. But in my generation, special ed owned the shots. You see, the problem you got with autism is in the milder forms. You've got a bunch of it over in the physics department, maybe half of them are disclosed and the other half are not. You wouldn't even have a physics department without autism. And it's a true continuous trait. When it's nerdy, turn into autism. And then you get very severe, individuals cannot talk, but some of those nonverbals can learn to type. Let me tell you a little secret on teaching them to type. You gotta use a tablet. The print has got to appear next to the keyboard. They cannot gaze shift. They cannot do this. Cannot gaze shift. So you need to use a tablet. Grandparents come up to me all the time. They find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. But that granddaddy has a good job. And where that diagnosis was helpful later in life was with relationships. That's where it was really, really helpful. And social rules were taught in a much more structured way in the 50s. Also, we've got kids graduating from college and they're not doing very well in the workplace. I strongly recommend this to all students. Do career-relevant internships. Do career-relevant jobs. Do things, find out what you like. You know, do you like doing research or do you hate doing it? Well, you need to find out. Get work experience while you're in college. The thing I want to ask you is, what would happen to some of the top innovators of the past if they were in school today? They were in today's society. Let's take Michelangelo. Almost certain he was autistic. Grubby little 12-year-old dropped out of school, running around in the churches looking at great art, grew up with stone cutting tools. That's the exposure. I got interested in the cattle industry because I was exposed to it when I was in my teens. If you don't get exposed to stuff, how can you get interested in it? And then mentoring. He was then apprenticed into a shop. So it starts out with exposure, then mentoring. Really important. And I had teachers who really helped me. Mr. Carlott, a science teacher, who got me interested in studying. I still haven't passed an algebra class. Philip Stiles, who helped me change majors, where teaching was really important. Not a very good researcher, but a very good teacher. There were people in industry that helped me. Wasn't all bad. I can tell you, being a woman was a much bigger barrier than autism, that's for sure. Einstein would be autistic today. No speech and language straight, he landed in an autism class. Steve Jobs was bullied. He's probably autistic. He was an artist. So let's go back to the different kinds of minds. The artist made the interface. That made the phone easy to use. The mathematician had to make the innards in the phone work. Thomas Edison, another person who was probably autistic. High school dropout, learned how to work, selling newspapers at a young age. Had a mentor that taught him the telegraph. Another famous autistic person there. I really love his engineering. Some of the other stuff we won't discuss because it's too controversial, but I love his engineering. But people are shaped by their past. He was horribly bullied as a teenager. Thrown down the stairs, face smashed in, horribly, horribly bullied as a teenage boy. Now, a Nobel Prize winner was 50% more likely to have an arts and crafts hobby compared to other scientists. That's another reason for keeping the creative classes. Here are some tips for working with the minds that are different. I have no working memory. That's why I need to have the pilot's checklist. If for any task that has a sequence. Also, we gotta stretch these students just slightly out of their comfort zone. You know, you don't throw them in the deep end of the pool, don't throw them into chaotic, multitasking, crazy takeout window at lunchtime, don't throw them into that. But you gotta stretch them out of the comfort zone, give them some choices of things that they can do. Also, they need very concrete feedback on social mistakes. On my first job, I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And a plant engineer pulled me into his office, and he didn't scream at me, but he told me that I had to apologize. He told me exactly what to do. He was a really good job coach. You know, that you can't be vague. You can't just say, you were rude to my employees. That is too vague. You've got to tell them exactly what to do. It's sort of like training a person to be in a foreign country. That's what you got to do. But you have to stretch them some. What's the ultimate goal of education? Where is a student 10 years after high school graduation? I was doing my first big design projects, and those are shown in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin. It shows exactly how I think visually. It shows some of the sensory issues. And one of the things, my big motivators, is I wanted to prove that I was not stupid. That was one of the things that I wanted to do. Okay, now the slide change is not working. I tried to scroll the chat and I messed up the slides. And I don't know how to scroll this. What I did wrong there. Okay, I didn't almost finish with the slides, and I didn't want to look at the chat, but I don't know how to scroll it, so, because I have a mouse with it. Okay, what I learned to do, when you're weird, you sell your work, not yourself. You sell your work. I showed off my work. And this is the drawing I sent to the Cargill Corporation back in the late 80s. I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant in North America. I think that's doing pretty good for somebody who thought stupid. It's doing pretty good for someone who can't do algebra. And I know a guy who's got a corporate jet, he can't do algebra. But boy, can he build a hydraulic power pack. And it's the most beautiful hydraulic power pack you ever saw. And I sent Cargill this picture. I basically sent them a 30-second wow. Right, put it back on that drawing. I learned to sell my work, not myself. That's really, really important. I sent them that picture. That's the recreation of one of the projects they've in the HBO movie. They recreated my projects. I love that. The visual thinking was shown accurately, and my project. And I had a brochure there. Had to be black and white back in those days. And that was another picture I sent them, a job I did in 1983. Now, one of the things that's given me meaning in life is having an interesting career. This is what a lot of these kids that are different need. Also, businesses need them. They need people like me to fix things. Who's going to fix all the broken stuff that Helen ripped up? And now Milton's going to go in there and tear up a bunch of stuff. I was supposed to do a great big mental health meeting in Florida. I canceled the trip. They're shutting everything down. I'm glad I didn't go there. Because they're closing the Orlando airport tomorrow. That's where I was supposed to be going. Disney World is shutting on Wednesday. Yeah, this is not good. But having an interesting career really has made my life worthwhile. And so if anything, my identity is basically career. I am what I do. And I want to help the people who think differently get into interesting careers. And I also talked to business people and said, we need these skills. You need them. So we have the autistic mind that is an extreme visual thinker, absolutely horrible at math. But then you have the mathematical mind, all your STEM students here. But there's a third type, it's a word thinker. This person's a word thinker. They're very good with facts. Like if they were in your store, they know everything was out in your warehouse without using the computer. They're very good at specialized retail because they can tell you every detail about different kinds of cars they're selling or different kinds of banking products. These are areas that have been very successful because we need the minds that are different. I tell business people, we do it because you need them. Do you want your rudder bearings installed correctly and not installed backwards so the rudder pedals don't work on the plane? Fortunately, the rudder's stuck in the neutral position and you can fly with the other flaps on wings. The rudder had been deflected all the way over on final approach to die. And that happened about 30 years ago when the steering stood up on a plane And it drilled itself like that into the ground at the Colorado Springs Airport. We were working cattle that day, and I go, once we rule out wind shear, the steering broke on that plane. Yeah, it did. And the rudder went all the way over. Pilot could not recover the final approach. The steering broke. Yeah. Maybe I kind of figured that 2 years later, it turned out that was what happened. Uncommanded rudder deflection. Got a fancy word for it. So what I want to do now, and maybe someone can show me how to scroll this so I can look at the questions here. Because all I do is mess it up when I try to scroll it. I was trying to scroll the chat. I put the arrow in there. Okay, that's how you do it. Okay. Sound is having a lot of complaints here about the sound. Yeah, see, a lot of questions. Let's get it. There's a lot of complaints here about the sound. That's too bad. Oh, it's talking right into the mic. That's pretty much the questions on the chat. Let's just start with some questions here. And if nobody has a question, I want to pick somebody. One thing I can't emphasize enough. That's the number one mistake students make that have a problem. They don't ask for help quick enough. When I failed my first math quiz, I went into the teacher's office and asked for help. And I went to a small college, he tutored me in his office. Then when I went to a bigger school, I had to hire a graduate student to tutor me in statistics. You know how I paid for that? Her mother owned a grungy wino bar in downtown Phoenix. My job was to cut the rotten floor out that was behind the bar because the beer cooler drained underneath the floor. It was like a fetid swamp beer that deep under the floor. So with the winos there, leaning over the bar, I took a skill saw, cut out the floor, put a new piece of plywood in there, and the beer still went underneath the floor. That paid for stat tutoring. That's the truth. But you see, I did something. And I think this gets back to when I was in 7th years old, in the 50s. This is standard parenting. You had to dress up in your good clothes when the parents had a party, and you had to greet the guests and serve the snacks. Made me less afraid to ask. I'm finding a lot of students today don't want to use their phone. I've got in my class right now, I've got 70 students in my livestock handling class, and I got some that are flunking out, and they reach out to them with emails, and they don't ask for help. I've got one autistic student, and she's doing very well. I'm happy about that. I don't know if she's close enough, but she's obviously autistic, and she's getting an A in the class, so I'm happy about that. But she's right there communicating with me. Where I've got other kids where, well, they cut half the classes, they didn't turn any of the assignments in. And they never contacted me or the TA. That's going on right now. Another thing I'm concerned about is we got people today totally removed from the world of practical. I had a student in my class a year and a half ago who had never used a ruler to measure anything. I had a student that didn't know that 30-inch wide cattle chute and 2'6" is the same thing. 30 inches wide and 2'6" is the same thing. I don't know what they're learning in school. Maybe they're learning algebra, but they're not learning anything practical, like just measuring stuff. All right, I'm going to pick somebody.
You're great. You have someone over here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Oh, right there, okay.
Hi. So I'm an autistic individual diagnosed late, and one of the things I've struggled with the most is I want to find interesting jobs and
You want
be
to find an interesting
creative,
job?
but it's always really hard to get past that hiring manager and.
All right, what you got to do is you got to find a back door. Half of all good jobs are back door. I was at a big autism conference over a month ago, and it was 10 miles from the Nissan plant, this giant Nissan plant. And I know factories that really need to have people that can maintain equipment, and autistics be good at that. And I said, this meeting has 400 people at it. There's probably somebody here that opened the door of the Nissan plant. Guess what? After the meeting, the wife of the maintenance head came up to me. And she said, well, how did you know I was here? I didn't know you were here. I just knew the probability that somebody that would, the back door. Okay, what are you good at?
Personally, I really like genetics and behavioral neuroscience and researching with animals.
Okay, now the thing is to start making a portfolio. and sending that to the right person. It's not the hiring manager. You've got to communicate with that professor. And when I went to get my PhD, I was kind of backdoor. I communicated directly with 2 professors. You show your portfolio off. Why should I hire you? I get resumes all the time from graduate students, and a lot of them are from other countries, but it's a generic resume. I know they've sent that out to 200 people. I throw those away. They don't write me a personal letter explaining why I should work with them. You know, it's a totally generic resume. And lots of times their field of interest is totally wrong. Okay, right here? Yeah, let's get the microphone. Hopefully the people can hear.
So my name is Miles. What are things that you're sensitive to?
Well, I was sensitive to noise when I was a child. In the school I went off, it hurt my ears. And one of the ways to help you reduce that is, let's take the school bell, for example. When going after school and school's closed, and you turn it on like 50 times. That actually sometimes works. Vacuum cleaners have gone from the most scared, awful thing to favorite toys when an autistic kid can turn them on and off. Another little hint, don't wear headphones all the time. It will make your sound sensitivity worse. But what you can do is have them with you all the time, so you have control. Have them with you, don't wear them, have them with you. And if the fire alarm goes off, you can put them on. Or some other horrible noise. You have to go to those awful bathrooms with those awful hand dryers. You can put it on for that, then take it off when you come out. But a lot of famous people were probably autistic. And I'm sure if I went over to the physics department, you know, let's spot the autistic ones. And you've got to be it. And we wouldn't have electric power without autism. Tesla, who invented the power plant, was autistic. Edison was autistic. We need their skills. And where the visual thinker like me, that can't do math, is I'm the one that's going to say, hey, when they originally did that crazy thing where they're chopping trees down and pellet for the pellets to feed the power plant, they said, we're going to just use wood industry leftovers. You don't have enough of those. See, that's the kind of stuff I could figure out. Yeah, carbon neutral pellets, you cut down trees, pelletize that, which is an energy intensive process, put it on a boat, powered by petroleum, to feed a power plant in the UK. Doesn't make any sense. But they actually did it. It went broke finally after 5 years. And they biofuel for airplanes, they backed off on that. Because you can't get enough of the vegetable feedstock. Well, planes are going to have to fly on oil for a good long time. But we need a better solar panel that's not going to degrade in 10 years. That's the kind of stuff math kids and physics kids have got to work on that. Yeah, take a little third grader out to the solar field and go, then what am I going to do with all these solar panels when they sort of don't work in 25 years? I can tell you, the private equity people that put them there, let's say they're on your ranch, you're a mess to clean up 25 years later. They'll be a big mess. Yeah, we need better ones that will last longer. Okay.
I'm an autistic researcher myself. I really appreciate your work, your inspiration. I'm curious in particular, you had a slide with a bullet point talking a bit about video games. What do you think about video games in terms of visual thinking and mechanics?
Oh, you get addicted to them. I'm telling you right now, the video game industry just laid off 12,000 people. AI is going to eat up video game design, animation. Video games, I wouldn't go into that field. Oh, I've read really sad stories about layoffs, people in their 40s. You know, they'll do gig economy, get the big game out, no health insurance. The visual thinkers, they high-end, hands-on jobs. I guess some blame the thrusters on the starliner. I built those valves up. They look exactly like stuff I've actually put together myself. They didn't do the sealant right. And then that stuff got into the thruster and clogged it up. See, that's something I can just see. There are little bitty thrusters all over it. I just was watching a video on it last night. Also learned more about the SpaceX spacesuits and some pretty cool features. You know, that stuff, like you see, that kind of stuff, the spacesuit thing is totally visual thinking. You know, they just figured out a different way to make it. Now I kind of, well, sometimes I lose my train of thought. But we gotta figure out how to get into jobs, and one of the things is back doors. They're everywhere. There's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up to the editor and I get his card. Because I knew if I wrote for that magazine, that would help my career. That's seeing a door. I did that. That scene is absolutely true. And then a week later, I produced the article. That's seeing the door to opportunity. They're everywhere and people don't see them. Or you're too chicken to go through them. And I got a press pass that got me into big, expensive meetings for free. Yeah, I took advantage of that. Okay.
Earlier, you had mentioned the importance of students coming and asking for help immediately rather than waiting until the semester had concluded. I know one step faculty can take to improve the sense of belonging and openness in the classroom is to include statements in the syllabi saying you're there to help them with accommodations.
Well, I tell that to my students, and I've had students, well, during COVID, I remember I had a student call me, and kids today don't want to use their phone, but I had a student that called me during COVID, and after talking to her about 45 minutes, she opened up to me about some obligations she had at home that were using up her weekends, and I said, well, you know what, you gotta drop on those lab classes. You know, either statistics or organic chemistry, you just got too much on your plate. And I'm gonna tell you which one to drop. One of those classes needs to go. And I drop it now before it wrecks your GPA, because you just have got too much stuff on your plate. You know, I try to be really helpful to students. You know, like they have to do a drawing project. And I said, no, just take a picture of your drawing on your phone, send it to me, I'll help you with the drawing. I did that with a couple of students. But I'm finding students now are more reluctant to ask for help than they used to be in the past.
Beyond making statements in the syllabi that students are encouraged to come to you, what other steps can faculty take to create an open and inclusive environment in the
Well, I don't
classroom?
know, that's getting too abstract to me, but I tell them that they need, call me. I give them my phone number. I give my classes my cell phone number. And out of 70 students, about 6 call me. Give them all the email addresses. They can come up to me after class. I don't know what else I can do. Also, in my class, they have to do a drawing assignment. Another thing I have them do is pick out a subject in behavior, and they have to look up journal articles on different databases. Look up journal articles and learn how to use the databases. So I have a few students that absolutely can't draw. But if they do well on the exam, it has no drawing on it, just has behavior stuff on it, and the other project, they'll get a B in the class. They can totally trash the drawings. There's some students absolutely can't draw, and some of the students that can't draw have a visual processing problem. And these are the kids, the dyslexic kids, when they see the print jiggle on the page. Try different pale colored papers, light blue paper, light green paper, pale gray, pale tan. Try different pale papers. And sometimes that works. They'll just say, oh, I can see. Now, it only works on a subgroup of dyslexia. Only works on a subgroup. It doesn't work for everybody. But when it works, it really works. That's a very simple intervention. Also try some different, like pink sunglasses. I had a student go out and buy some pink sunglasses. She said, I got an A on my economics quiz because the PowerPoints don't jiggle anymore. I like to give people just practical things they can do. This might be only 10% of dyslexics. And just, people say, well, it's not evidence-based. It's not evidence-based because it only works on 10%. So if you do it on everybody, they'll say it does, but I've seen it work. And it's something very simple. You're talking about colored paper here. It's very cheap, it can't hurt you, and sometimes, once in a while, it works. You see, I always like to try to give people simple things. Also, people respect really good work. People thought it was weird, but when I showed off my drawings, I got respect. And the other thing I did is when I designed something, I wrote about it. I wrote about it in journal articles, and I wrote about it in the ag press, in the trade press, too. But the thing I'm worried about is that my kind of thinker can't do higher math, but you need us non-mathematicians. Somebody's got to not put rudder bearings in the plane's rudder in backwards, so when it gets cold, the rudder doesn't work. The pilot pushes on the rudder pedals and nothing happens. Yeah, I fly all the time. I kind of look at airplane tails in another way. Then I think about when I visited a private equity company, and It's not a good mix there.
We have some questions in the chat.
Okay,
We have a couple of
we have a couple of questions
questions.
here, okay, great.
So could you explain why algebra is difficult for
Okay.
visual thinkers?
The reason why it's difficult is I cannot remember it. There's no way to make a picture. Now, I can remember a formula like pi times radius squared for sizing hydraulic cylinders, because I see the piece of equipment. I can probably do the math for roof trusses, because there'd be a specific formula. But you see, I can't remember, and algebra teachers, they're trying to teach it, they complain, I can't get these students to remember it. And the person that's building beef plants right now, and he's got a corporate jet, took a single welding class in high school, he can't do algebra. You see, I think that people push the algebra so much, they think you need it for logical thinking. That is not how I think. You see, well, that wheelchair example, I just saw it. It's the Southwest Airlines blue wheelchair, very specific wheelchair. Now, I wouldn't put infants in that. These kids have to be big enough to sit up and not fall out. But it's something where I instantly saw the solution. And a visual thinker gets better and better and better the more stuff they see, because then I've got pictures I can pull out of memory. Now, I have no problem doing my arithmetic. Now, I hit a barrier in algebra. And there's some engineers that are visual thinkers and they waffle through it, maybe get a C in it. You know, we're forcing veterinarians to take calculus. I don't know any veterinarian who uses calculus. And the tiny amount of algebra for drug dosing can just be flat memorized. You know, that's something you just have to memorize that. But I think the math thinkers don't understand the visual thinkers. And they have the degreed engineer has a tendency to say, well, those people just build equipment. I'm sorry, I worked with them over there at the Montfort Fab Shop, which unfortunately is closed now. We can blame ConAgra for that. Not JBS, but ConAgra did that. Yeah, we're missing it now. They can't find anybody to fix anything in that plant. And the shops that are left are price gouging so bad that you need us visual thinkers to fix things. It's a different kind of problem solving. You need us non-mathematicians, because we'd say, hey, yeah, you can make pigs fly, but you couldn't get enough pig fat. The amount of pig fat you have to use for one flight is so astronomical, it's just ridiculous. It's like the whole production of one gigantic plant, one day's production for one transatlantic flight. That's not, yeah, it works, the plane flies on it just fine. That's the magic of chemistry. I don't have any idea how they do it. But I can help you decide, should you do it? Because I can see that I can't grow enough pigs, I can't grow enough corn to feed all the airplanes over at the Denver airport. There's no way.
You mentioned you had to learn how to sell your work instead of yourself. Can you say more about how trying to sell yourself to people in potential jobs didn't work?
Well, I just showed the drawings off. I showed off the drawings. You see, fortunately, in the design work that I did, I had a fancy portfolio that I could show off. Okay, a mathematical autistic could show off some physics they did, some math they did. You know, show off the work. And you show it off to the right person, you're in. You know, I'm seeing too many parents that don't teach their autistic kids how to do anything. I'm seeing fully verbal autistic kids that never gone shopping, they never had a bank account, they're not learning any life skills. That's why the grandparents had jobs, because they learned life skills. Okay, now, if you're on the spectrum, what are you good at?
I do physics. I'm a physics grad student.
You're a grad student?
Yeah.
In what?
Physics.
Physics, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's good. Then you get your physics work to show off. And one of the things that motivated me is a lot of people thought I was stupid, and I wanted to prove I wasn't stupid. That was an absolute huge, huge motivator for me. Are you doing well in physics?
Sometimes.
What are you going to be doing for internships and career-relevant things in the summer?
So physics grad school is a little different. We just do the same research project throughout the 6 or 7 year experience. And yeah, I was just curious.
But what you want to do, if it's people on the spectrum, it's always better to have a slow transition from school to work, where you're doing doing job things before you graduate. So you don't just sort of, bam, now you're trying to get a job. And where are most of the students in your program going? And how are they getting jobs? I can tell you, I got jobs. How did I get that cargo job? I sent that drawing that this is back before there was internet, 2 foot by 3 foot, nice drawing, and some plastic pages with pictures in it, my brochure and 2 trade journal articles, and a sheet of references. Send it to head of Cargill. 30-second wow. That's how I did it. You know, and I had a fancy portfolio I could show off. Showing off the work. What kind of stuff would you be doing in physics? See, I'm interested in, I look at all the stuff, particle accelerators, stuff they're doing in astronomy and things like that. Really amazing stuff that's being done. They're trying to find out the secrets of the universe. Well, you've got to start thinking about what would you want to do? What's the goal? What are you going to do with a physics degree? That's why you got to try on enough stuff so you find out what you love, but also find out what you hate. Okay, got a question here?
Yeah, I think it's actually related.
What do you see as the baby steps or low-hanging fruit options to help children in school gain the skills in areas where they don't have it, how to just start doing it? First of all, let's talk about the skills. I'm concerned we got policymakers today that have never used a ruler. I went to a conference, this was super interesting. I went to a conference where they had people that repair power grid equipment. This was a good conference. But I found out about a person that went into Home Depot and bought a light fixture for their bathroom and didn't know that you had to use tools to install it. I'm not kidding. That was about 10 days ago. Do you want that person making policy on practical things like water systems? And it's going to be all too theoretical. See, this question here, I've got to have more information as to what the home economics shop class. Well, you could always take a shop class. It's never too late to start. Take a shop class. No, you can learn it now. But I think taking these classes out of the schools is the worst thing the schools ever did. We got a lot of complicated things, and I can tell you, you're going to need the clever engineering department to clean up the storms, but these storms are wrecking. I'm very concerned about the power grid equipment it's destroyed. Some of the big stuff has a year lead time. And I talked to somebody that made some of the big stuff, and I said, now if I had to triple shift your factory to turn out this stuff, how fast could you turn it out? This person had absolutely no idea how to even begin to figure that out. I know how to do that. I just got to figure out, copper, you better get lovey-dovey with chili. It's one of the first things I'm going to do, because I'm going to need a bunch of that. But you see, I see it. So for supply chain management, I got to get these things. First, I've got to get supplies to build the stuff. And I also find that stuff very interesting. This kind of problem solving really interesting. And I want to learn as far as disability goes, there's a tendency to overgeneralize on that. I had a blind roommate. We got along great. I moved over furthest from the door and kept all my junk out of her side of the room so she wouldn't trip on it. And she didn't know that you could buy a radio that could pick up TV signals. And I said, I told her, you can get a radio that picks up TV signals. And we were both Star Trek fans, and we'd watch Star Trek on the radio. Because Monday Night Football had the only TV occupied. So we watched it on the radio. It was pretty good on the radio, classic Trek. But it was my idea that you could get a radio that picked up TV signals. See, again, that's something practical. That's how I think. How can we help people to help that do an accommodation we may need to do? I don't want to talk about it in the abstract. Okay, wheelchairs don't go up the steps very well. They have a hard time, well, they can come in here. Okay, so they build it so it's accessible. Wheelchair ramps are also just great for other loads, being brought into buildings. But you see, that's something definite. A wheelchair ramp is something on new construction that costs almost nothing. Retrofitting buildings with elevators costs a fortune. But you see, I see that stuff. And then there's some students I think need to take a lighter load, and there's some students who need extra time on tests. And for a lot of students that have anxiety, you give them the extra time on tests and they don't use it. But knowing that they have it relieves the anxiety. But that's a simple accommodation. And sometimes it's ending up, they take an extra 10 minutes on a test. And I'm one of those, that I need extra time on tests. And I have to write things down. Oh boy, was I taking notes in math class, and the math teacher would say, why are you taking all these notes? Because I don't remember it if I don't take the notes. I gotta write it down. But this is probably a little different kind of talk than I expected, but I'm seeing too many kids similar to me going absolutely nowhere. They're ending up on a disability payment playing video games in the basement when they ought to fix things. And there's been some very good successes with video game addicts introducing car mechanics. They find out that's more interesting. There's a great program in Denver that's teaching car mechanics, welding, electrical trades to autistic adults. And they have a mechanic teacher and then also a job coach. So they're learning the life skills. Then they have contracts with local car dealers to place these mechanics. 70% success rate. And they're loving it.
Dr. Grandin, we're nearing the end of our allotted time. We probably have time for one more question. Is there another
All right, let's
question?
just take one more question, and
I actually think there's a great one here.
let's get a question off the chat here. Okay. Do you agree that communication is an essential ingredient for collaboration? How do different kinds of thinkers communicate more effectively with each other? Okay, now, there's math stuff that a math thinker is not going to be able to communicate to me. But let's go back to something like the Starliner. You need someone like me to build and assemble the thrusters correctly. The mathematician tells me when to thrust. Okay, being aware of that collaboration. And the math person's not going, well, that's just a shop guy putting that thrusters together. That kind of talk really pisses me off. Because I spent 25 years in heavy construction. I worked with shop people all around, and they had 20 patents each. Don't just say they just build stuff. No, they invent stuff. So the first thing is you have to have respect for each other's skills. I can't do the mathematics for the re-entry angle. I can't do that. But I respect that. But I have to give the mathematician a piece of equipment that's gonna follow his commands. And he needs to respect me for building that equipment right and not getting pieces of junk in it that are gonna make it not work. You see, it's understanding I don't have to understand everything a mathematician does, because I don't. But it's understanding the different ways of problem solving that are brought to the table. I was flabbergasted, and this is written up in my book, Visual Thinking, and I've got it on my phone, and wants to screenshot it and get my book, Visual Thinking, that Fukushima was destroyed because they didn't put waterproof doors on the basement. How could they not see that? Mathematicians calculate. The mathematicians didn't see it. Watertight doors would have saved it. Simple, old-fashioned, watertight doors. That's why you need us non-mathematicians there too. It's a different kind of thinking. And they figured out how to make it earthquake-proof. Oh, it's beautiful. It shook and it shook and it shook. 20 minutes later, the tsunami drowned it. With very, very bad results. It's understanding how you need it. I understand that I write a rough draft for the book, and then Betsy smooths it out, and also adds things to it. And she thinks differently than I do, and I respect how she thinks, she respects how I think, and then you work together in a collaborative way. I hope that answers the question. And that doesn't mean that I become a mathematician. I can't become a mathematician. I can't make jet fuel out of pig fat. But, that needs a 15% diet of corn in there. 85% pig fat and 15% corn. Yeah, they can do that. I don't know how they do that. But I'm the one that can say, should you be doing that? You can't get enough of the feedstock. And right now, we're putting 40% of our grain crop into ethanol, right now. My question. 40% of our corn crop is made into ethanol for about 8% of our gas supply. You see, just see that. All right, let's take another, is there another good question online? I'm trying to keep this water away from the computer, because I do believe in the separation of water and electronics. It won't spill on that thing, because it's up on that. Oh, we got a question right there, okay. What kind of things are most helpful for your division student to show in their portfolio, convince a professor to take them on? What might not seem impressive, the thing is, it depends what the professor is. When I was working on my master's thesis, one of the people on my committee was the industrial design professor. He was interested in what I did. You know, I showed my stuff to my committee, actually for my master's, because I did a thing on cattle handling, was a construction professor and an industrial design professor, because the animal science professors just thought it was stupid. You have to show the work to the right professor. If it's mathematics, you show it to the mathematics professor, you don't show it to me, because I wouldn't understand it. You have to show it to the right professor. Art, you show the art professor, but the industrial design professor was the perfect one, because what I basically do is industrial design. And show off that stuff to the right person. There was an autistic English major that got in because they sent their poetry to the right English professor. You have to send the stuff to the right professor that's in the right field. No, there's no way I'm going to judge math. No, math, you got to send that to the math department, the physics department. That's what you got to do. You see, that's obvious to me. But maybe to some of the word thinkers, it isn't so obvious. You got to show it to the right professor. Like going up and getting that editor's card. I did that. That scene in the movie is absolutely true. I did that. And that was very important for getting my career started. No, you got to show the work to the right person and the door opens. And then you got to have the guts to go through it. Because I've heard sad stories where a kid got a full scholarship at the top art school. It was too chicken to take it. No, the door opens, you walk through it. It only stays open for a second. If I hadn't gotten that writing job, oh man, that press pass was valuable. Very valuable. $500 registration fees waived for big expensive national meetings in the cattle industry. Yeah, and I write good articles. I made sure I didn't abuse the press pass. I wrote really good articles, but I did a little selling on the side too.
Well, thank you, Dr. Graham, for being with us today. We have reached our limit. If everyone could please join me in thanking her one more time. This does conclude the keynote address for the 2024 City Board Disability Symposium. Next week, we do have programming Monday through Friday, multiple in-person sessions that have Zoom access options for anyone that's unable to attend in person, as well as multiple Zoom options for Zoom exclusive options for presentations. They cover a variety of topics, so we encourage you to take a look at the symposium website and see what else we have offered, if anything might be of interest to you. We do have a QR code on posters next to the door on your way out, so you can scan that and take you right to the website and you can go straight from there. Thank you all for attending and have a safe drive home.